Please listen to the following recording to allow you to improve your scores on your writing assessments. If you watch this before you start writing your papers, this will help you greatly in increasing your scores. When writing your papers, the structure should include an introduction paragraph to prime the reader about the topic of your essay, and in the body of the paragraph there should be structured paragraphs to support your topic or argument. Oftentimes you'll have a paragraph for each prompting question for the assignment. And then you'll have a concluding paragraph in which you summarize all the takeaway points that include the common themes within the essay. It is important to have transitions, which are one or more sentences at the end of a paragraph, linking one idea to another to begin the next paragraph, and this is what makes your paper flow. Each paragraph should express and support one idea. Paragraphs get confusing when you try to incorporate too many ideas into one, and this is what makes your paper not flow very well. Paragraphs should be between 3 to 5 sentences. You should have a topic sentence or a thesis statement, and this is generally a map for your essay. You want to start the idea for the paragraph, and then all sentences within a paragraph should be linked to this topic sentence. After the topic sentence, the following sentences should present evidence to support your main claim in the essay. Support can be factual, or it can be a story or a personal example, which fits for a lot of our career exploration topics. Have you ever used an outline before writing a paper? Many of you might have done this in your English 101 classes, and it's a really important thing that you can do to help you organize what your paper will look like. Here is an example of how you might help visualize what your paper will look like. This will help you to make sure that you have one idea per paragraph to keep your paper organized and flowing. And it also makes sure that you have evidence to support each of your ideas in each paragraph. I'm going to go over an example of how to write a paper. This is just a fun, silly example about sloths, if you were writing a paper about sloths. And this is actually a picture that I took of a sloth on a trip in Costa Rica. So if we were writing a paper about sloths, and to provide some factual information about them, I'm going to write an introduction that sums up all of my main ideas. I have color-coded everything, so you can see that in the introduction, I pretty much start off by explaining in green the first idea that I'm going to talk about in my first supporting paragraph. And then in red, you'll see the topic that I'm going to talk about in my second supporting paragraph. And then in blue is all of the main topic in my third supporting paragraph. So this shows how you're essentially summing up the 3 main ideas you're going to be discussing in this paper. So in the introduction, I start by saying sloths are the best animal, which is what the paper is going to be about, and then I talk about how sloths are the world's slowest mammal, which is going to be my first paragraph with supporting evidence. And then I talk in my second supporting paragraph about how sloths have many special skills. And in the third paragraph, I talk about how sloths spend most of their time high in trees. And then I conclude by just saying, for these reasons, I find sloths the most interesting animal. So here you can see in my first supporting paragraph in green that I have sloths are the world's slowest mammal. And then I have supporting facts that sloths are so sedentary that algae grows on its coat, that sloths may only move 1 tree down in a day on average, and sloths sleep 15 to 20 hours a day. So if you look at all of these 3 supporting evidence facts, these all line up with my main point that they're the world's slowest mammal. So they're all supporting evidence for that topic. And if you look down, the same thing happens in my next paragraphs where I talk about the skills that sloths have and the fact that sloths spend most of their time in trees. I support these with sentences about factual evidence supporting my main points. And then in the end, in the conclusion, I again sum up what I just said in my 3 main points. So I say, in conclusion, I think the sloth is the best animal. and I sum up what I said in my first supporting paragraph, my second, and my third. It's all color-coded so that you can see how this works. It's best if your conclusion and your introduction vary a little bit, but you're summing up the same main points, just rewording things a bit. Here are some general tips about writing that are very important for you to go over to avoid making some common mistakes. Transitions are the glue that hold your thoughts together. It's very important that you transition between paragraphs. So you might use a common transition word in the last sentence of a paragraph before you get to the next paragraph, or you might use a transition word at the beginning of the next paragraph. Here are some common transition words like first or first of all, in addition, next, more importantly. These all connect paragraphs together. It's important to decipher between active and passive voice. Active voice is usually a bit more clear, and the subject of the sentence performs the action, such as the dog bit the boy. Whereas in the passive voice, the sentence becomes more complex and the verb is highlighted, such as the boy was bit by the dog. So the subject, the dog, is not emphasized as much. And sometimes often passive voice is used when it's not needed as much and it could be clearer by just using the active voice. So it's important to think about which voice should be used. In addition, you should vary your sentence structure. So if you use a short sentence, then you can follow it with a more complex sentence. So just varying the length and style of the sentences. Incomplete sentences are another common mistake that I see. So you want to make sure that you don't have fragments in your sentences that are disconnected from the main clause. You'll catch these often if you read your sentences out loud to yourself. So all sentences should include a subject and a main verb. Some additional common mistakes that I see often enough to give you some ideas of what to replace them with are below. A lot of times I see students start a sentence with because, and this is not done in professional writing. If it actually fits to use because there, then you can replace that with a more professional due to phrase. I also see a lot of very and really in your writing, which is usually used as a filler word or for emphasis. But the more you use this word, the more awkward it sounds and the less professional. There are some synonyms, but I prefer that you generally just cut out all of the very and reallys in your writing because it's usually a filler word. I often see that there are very common mistakes or typos or clauses that aren't complete sentences that you could have caught if you had read your paper aloud. So I suggest that you either find a friend who you trust to edit your paper, or just take some time, do something else, and come back to your paper and read it out loud to yourself. It's very important that you actually read it out loud and not just read it to yourself in your head, because you often don't catch those errors that you catch if you read it out loud. Another common mistake that I see is unnecessary shift in verb tense. You want to do your best to keep your verb tense the same throughout, especially within the same sentence. You should never be changing within the same sentence if you can avoid it. Here's an example. A few countries produce almost all of the world's illegal drugs, but addiction affected many countries. You see that they switch from present to past tense within the same sentence. So in this case, you would want to keep it in the present tense and say affects many countries. Here's another example. Priya was watching the great blue heron take off. Then she slips and falls into the swamp. So you want to keep this in the past tense and make it slipped and fell into the swamp. It's important that you avoid informality in your paper. Your paper is a reflection of the new professional you that's developing. So when I see something that sounds like dialogue that you've just written straight from your head on your paper, this is a red flag to me because I'm looking for very professional writing. So make sure when you read through your paper that you look and see if a sentence sounds professional or if you might have accidentally wrote something as it came across right in your head. Another common mistake is overuse of the same word, and I've talked about the overuse of the word very is often used for emphasis, but actually when you say something like, I'm very excited and very passionate about this field, it oftentimes comes across as the opposite. So if you were to just say, I'm excited and passionate about this field, that comes across as more genuine. So try to use different variations, different words, and look up synonyms if you find yourself using the same word. In addition, another common mistake that I see is a lack of subject-verb agreement. It's important that if you have multiple subjects that you have a plural verb used with that subject. And if you have a singular subject that you have a singular verb used. The following website is one that you can utilize to look up subject-verb agreement if you have difficulties in this area. In addition, you want to form the possessive singular of nouns by adding a comma. So you could use its instead of it is, and it's for the possessive. You want to also, in addition, another thing that you can do is to avoid using parentheses and instead put the phrase that would be in parentheses in between commas in your sentence. And you'll see an example here. The best way to travel, unless you are pressed for time, is to travel by foot. We're going to talk a little bit about what to do when you have two independent clauses, which are two ideas that can stand by themselves as independent sentences, or they can be combined by a comma and a conjunction, or the use of a semicolon. So one of the choices that you have is to decide if you want to include the two independent ideas together, and sometimes that's warranted when the ideas are similar or when they belong together to make a point. So you can do so by using a comma before a conjunction, introducing an independent clause, like so. This room is unbelievably hot, comma, and I think I'm going to pass out. You could, in addition, just use a semicolon between the two independent sentences. This room is unbelievably hot, semicolon, I think I'm going to pass out. You could separate the sentences with a semicolon and a conjunctive adverb. So this discussion is interesting, semicolon, nevertheless, I am going to pass out. Or you can decide to split the sentences into two independent complete sentences. This room is unbelievably hot, period, I think I'm going to pass out. So overall, in the basics of academic writing, you want to structure your essay based on your thesis statements like we talked about. Make an outline with each topic sentence per paragraph, and this will help you provide the overall picture with supporting evidence. Make sure not to use any slang, contractions, profanity, emoticons, texting, language of any sort. Your writing really represents the professional you, which is what we're trying to form throughout this course. Make sure that you read over your paper out loud and have a friend peer edit it before turning it in. In addition, you can get extra credit by taking your paper to the Writing Center, and if you go to the extra credit on Blackboard, there's a sheet that you can fill out, and you just turn in your rough draft and your final draft of the paper together with that sheet that's filled out and signed by the person at the Writing Center, and you get extra credit for doing that. So it's important that you edit because spell check doesn't always work. It doesn't catch your typos and a lot of grammatical errors, so make sure to read things out loud and use all the editing tools you have. Here are some references and resources that have been used throughout this PowerPoint.